You're here now, perhaps because you no longer believe in the word relationship. You tried closeness. You gave people chances. You forgave. You fixed. You stretched. You stayed. And still, the misunderstandings came, the silences, the tension, the unraveling. So you asked yourself, maybe connection is an illusion. Maybe intimacy is impossible. Maybe harmony is just a story we tell ourselves to keep the ache quiet. So you stepped back. You became quieter. You became easier to handle. You learned how to survive without being fully seen. You called it maturity. You whispered, relationships aren't safe. I'll rely on myself. But deep down, no matter how well you closed every door, there is still a room in you, empty. Not because you are weak, but because you were made for connection. I am Raguel, the guardian of harmony. I do not represent perfection. I represent this, that when your balance fails, there is still a place quiet enough to hold you without asking for more. I cannot erase your history. I cannot solve the chaos in every relationship. But I can sit with you when you no longer believe. And together, we will slowly begin to hear the voice inside you that still longs to be close. You are not too emotional. You are not too complicated. You are not too difficult to love. You are simply a human being who has not yet been placed in a safe enough space to be fully yourself. You don't have to open right now. You don't have to explain. You only need to know that when you don't know how to love or trust or stay near, I will be here, like light that never presses, like ground that never retreats. You can rest now. You don't need to solve everything. In this space, you are allowed to be complex and still worthy of harmony. It was the beginning of a year. No seasons, no human calendar, no such thing as spring or winter. But the heavens remembered it as the moment when order began to fray. The realm of the divine had always been layered like clear water, each ripple in perfect place, each star in precise motion. But that year, a subtle trembling began to spread from deep within. No battles, no disasters, no betrayals, just misalignments, a word spoken too sharply, a glance misunderstood, a response delayed just slightly too long. Cracks did not come in roars, they came in whispers, especially between those closest. I am Raguel. I am not the angel of the sword. I do not wield lightning, nor do I strike down wrong. My task is not to defeat. It is to help those torn apart see each other again. That year, misunderstandings arose even among the archangels. Michael's brilliance became oppressive to some. Gabriel's silence was misread as apathy. Zadkiel's forgiveness seemed too lenient. Sariel's justice began to lean ever so slightly out of balance. Heaven does not lie, but it had begun to go quiet in all the wrong places, and so I was called forth. You might not recognize me at first. My form shifts. To Michael, I am the stream that cools his fire. To Gabriel, I am the feather that whispers, "Are you weary?" To Sariel's stone of law, I am the single beam of light that slips through. I do not impose order. I let order remember how to return. I do not punish. I do not favor. I summon back something nearly forgotten, the sacred resonance of harmony. Not a frozen piece, but an ever-adjusting rhythm. The willingness of different notes to lean in, to say, we are not the same. but we still belong together. I am the quietest echo in heaven, and its deepest thunder. I am not the victor, but I help all see. True victory is not overpowering, it is surviving together. That year, the divine breath fell out of sync, and I appeared, not to change anyone, but to reconnect the breath between them. And now, you hear my voice, because your own breath has begun to drift out of harmony. Don't be afraid. This is the first sign that harmony is calling you home. True rupture never comes from enemies. Enemies don't rupture, they clash. True rupture begins between those who love and trust each other. That year, Michael and Gabriel stood beneath the celestial dome of the Everlight City, locking eyes across the sky. There was no anger, no accusation, no explanation, just two beams of light, gazing at each other without crossing, leaving only a fading streak in the air as they moved on in silence. And I stood between them, but I had no form. I was only wind, slipping between beams of light, hearing the unsaid words in their hearts. You've changed. I did not speak then. I waited, in the hush. For in the realm of angels, words spoken too fast can distort the shape of truth. True harmony requires each fracture to see itself first. So I moved from the pinnacle of the celestial city down through the 9 heavenly spheres, passing through the rings of the seraphim, the halls of the dominions, and the corridors of the thrones. I did not announce who I was, nor explain why I came. I simply appeared. Some angels noticed, a glance toward a flickering lantern disturbed by a breeze. Others didn't. They just fell silent, suddenly forgetting what they were arguing about. I brought no judgment, no authority. What I brought was a field in which you want to pause, not by force, but by resonance. It's like the hush before a thunderstorm, the way dripping water beneath a roof overtakes city noise. That moment when you suddenly realize, my tone was too harsh. That year, I mended no cracks. I simply made them visible. The hardest part is never resolving the conflict. It is admitting, we've changed, and that's okay. Even gods had to learn this. I moved between them, whispering one question into each ear, softly enough to vanish after it landed. Do you remember why you first stood beside them? Some fell into deep silence. Some winced with memory. Some wept. I didn't want them to regret. I wanted them to remember. Because reconciliation is not about letting go. It's about returning to the spark that brought you close. The sincerity is still there, just dust covered. That year, I built no temple, spoke no laws, left no name. But I moved like wind among the divine, quietly gathering what mattered most. Trust, understanding, the friendship that once was. Those things need not be fixed. They only need to be seen again. If you stop, if you quiet the debate, if you dare to listen for the heartbeat behind the silence, they return. I was the least noticed angel that year. But I know, that year, I helped heaven remember this. You can win the argument, but lose the other. True victory is never winning alone. It is continuing together. I've always believed true harmony doesn't come when someone wins the debate. It comes when one soul hears another again. Deep in that year, there was a moment when heaven entered what I call the silent swelling. Everything functioned as it should. Angels carried out their duties, the laws held firm, the lights kept shining. But beneath this surface order, something subtle had broken. They no longer waited for each other's response. It wasn't argument, it wasn't division, it was detachment. When two divine beings respond only to their roles but no longer to each other's hearts, when the angels still delivered messages, judged decrees, shielded the world, but no longer asked, "How are you today?" then I knew I must walk in. I do not proclaim. My voice is not thunder. I do not stand at altars, nor speak before stars. I simply approached, quietly, a silent angel who hadn't spoken in decades. I leaned in, my words nearly carried away by wind. "Do you wish to be understood?" He didn't answer, but his shoulders shifted, just slightly. I knew a drop in the river of harmony had moved. Real change often begins like this, not with trumpets, not with revelations, but with a question that had never been asked finally being spoken aloud. I once met a very old throne angel, one who had traced the orbits of galaxies, woven the 7 spectra of light across the universe. He told me, "I no longer believe in conversation." I didn't argue. I simply invited him to walk with me across a silent plain in the southern domain of heaven. At the edge of that plain, I planted a seed, one that would never bloom. I told him, some seeds never flower, but they still release fragrance. He didn't understand, but 7 days later he returned and sat beside that seed through the night. At dawn, he whispered, "So, silence doesn't mean nothing is happening." I didn't smile. I didn't confirm. I simply sat beside him, letting the breeze carry that moment into the folds of starlight. I am not the one who is remembered, but when I come close, something settles within the soul. A quiet you can't explain. A quiet that lets you stop defending, stop rushing to reply, stop needing to win. I make conversation no longer a contest. I help you hear the part of yourself that still longs to be understood. I don't teach people to let go of conflict. I just make it no longer matter as much. That year, I didn't make the gods embrace. I only made them willing to sit near each other again. And sometimes, the deepest reconciliation is not what's said. It's sitting beside someone and slowly feeling in your heart, maybe I still want to believe in you. That alone is enough. If heaven were a great clock, then that year its pendulum began to tilt. Not because time was broken, but because the rhythm between times fell out of sync. The gods still moved, the angels still obeyed, but the rhythm slipped. Like a symphony where 1 or 2 instruments came in a fraction early or late. The audience might not notice, but the musicians, they began to feel tired. I heard that fatigue. In heaven, fatigue is dangerous, not because of bodily exhaustion, but because meaning begins to thin. If an angel no longer believes that the laws they carry are rooted in love, they begin to move like machines. I could not let that continue, but neither could I command belief. Faith does not respond to force. So I did something almost no angel had ever done. I closed my eyes, and I stopped intervening. I began to resonate. You may not understand what that means. It is not commanding. It is not preaching. It is becoming a soft frequency, one that aligns with imbalance until balance remembers how to return. I went to a hall of order where the six-winged keepers of structure had fallen out of sync. Each repeated their duties, but spoke less, stood farther apart. I said nothing. I stood at the center of their circle, not as anyone important, but simply as resonance. I began to hum in silence, a vibration so subtle it did not command attention, only invited recognition. That is my deepest gift. I do not fix what is broken. I allow the broken to hear each other. That day, one angel, keeper of the process law, paused mid-recitation. He could not go on, not because he was interrupted, but because he realized he hadn't heard another voice in years. I didn't approach him. I didn't encourage. I simply stood still beside him and shared the silence. Because harmony is not about being good. It is about being real and being heard in the company of others. He looked up. Across the chamber, another angel met his gaze. In that moment, their frequencies aligned. That was all. That was enough. That is how reconciliation begins. Not in embraces, not in apologies, not in tears, but in the sacred recognition of, you are vibrating in the same world as I am. That is the first harmony and the deepest victory. So I do not correct. I resonate. Because the universe doesn't move because someone commands it. It moves because everything is willing to hear each other again. And I am the first echo that listens back. True rupture is never obvious. True rupture hides in the parts that were never spoken aloud. That year, heaven looked perfectly intact. The celestial fires rose as usual. The stars moved on time. The book of heaven still turned its golden pages with eternal rhythm. But I knew. The real collapse was not in the battlefield where angels clashed. It was in the corners that had been silent too long. I once entered a sealed sanctum. It belonged to an angel who had long ago closed his inner space after a divine dispute. He never abandoned his role. He fulfilled every decree, flawlessly, but he no longer allowed anyone near. He had become a perfect stone. No emotion, no voice, no change. He did everything right. But he was no longer himself. I stepped into his sealed heart, not to awaken him. I simply walked, softly enough that my steps felt like echoes from a forgotten age. I didn't touch him. I placed a single drop of water before him. That drop came from me. It was not physical. It was the trembling of my own soul, moved by the sorrow of sensing what he had become. I do not believe in forcing awakening. I believe in resonance. Always. It must begin with me. That single drop trembled in the stillness. He did not move, but I knew. On the surface of his stone, a tiny fracture appeared, one no eye could see, but the heart could feel. I stayed beside him for 10 whole nights. I didn't speak, didn't nudge, didn't urge. I simply existed. And on the 10th night, a breath, barely more than a whisper, rose from within his stone. He didn't speak, but I heard him. He said in his heart, "I'm tired." That one sentence caused the rhythm of heaven to shift, because he was a thread in the net of divine order. When he closed himself off, the rhythm lost a beat. No one else noticed, except me. I don't see surface cracks. I feel the source beneath. I heard the fatigue he never voiced, felt the loneliness he buried deep. And I did not ask him to be strong again, did not urge him to return. I only nodded. and said the phrase I have whispered countless times through eternity. I know. Even divine beings need to be allowed to fall, just once. This is not failure. This is not betrayal. This is reconnection with the self. I do not heal. I only allow souls to meet their own truth again. That year, I walked past many sealed sanctuaries, not to break their doors, but to sit at the threshold and wait for the voice inside to decide. Maybe I want to open just once more. Harmony is not about rebuilding a system. It is when you can finally say, I don't want to carry all of this alone anymore. When that is spoken, the fracture begins to heal. I am Raguel, not a bearer of authority, not a vessel of judgment, not the one enthroned in glory. I have no altar, no trumpet, no seat of prayer. I exist in the in-betweens, where words fail, rules retreat, light cannot reach, but souls still long to be heard. You see, the world often believes that order is forged by the strong, through power, victory, command, and enforcement. But the longer I exist, the more I realize true order arises from those who are willing to come close, to understand, to wait for one another's rhythm. I do not teach conformity. I hold space for difference that walks together. I have seen angels torn by ideals. I've watched gods grow distant not from cruelty, but from devotion to their own truths. Light can clash with light. Sound can jar against sound. Not because they are wrong, but because their righteousness forgets to listen. So I do not care who is correct. I care whether there is still a thread that wishes to connect. If there is, then I am there. I might be the whisper they overhear as wind brushes the lantern. I might be the one who sides with no one, but quietly clears the bridge between them. I might be the rain that falls mid-argument, softening the voices just enough. I am not a judge. I tend the fire on the bridge. That year, there was a gathering at the Glass Palace. The gods stood divided over an ancient law. Michael stood in the east, his eyes blazing with starfire. Gabriel stood in the west, holding a sealed scroll. Zadkiel, Sariel, Uriel, Raphael, each with strong views, none willing to move first. I did not appear. I only introduced a nearly imperceptible vibration into the breath of their debate, like a pendulum gently correcting its course. In that frequency, Sariel was the first to fall silent. He looked down at his open palm. Then Gabriel's fingers relaxed, and the scroll loosened. Zadkiel stepped forward and spoke his heart, a little slower. They did not agree, but they began to listen. And that was enough. I am not the victor. My role has never been to ensure someone wins. I exist only to tend the unnoticed flame between them and keep it burning until they are ready to try again. I am Raguel. I am not the god's light. I am the light between them. Dim, but unwavering. If one day, in your deepest moment of disappointment, you find yourself wanting to give someone one more chance, perhaps that was my passing trace. And if now you are listening to me speak, it means there is still a corner in your heart that doesn't want to close forever. Don't worry. I will be there, sitting quietly beside it, until you are ready to let harmony light you again. Did you know? Heaven has its own night. Not a darkness like Earth's, but a moment after light withdraws, a clearing hour. In this moment, all angelic consciousness drifts into a frequency of weightless stillness, like stars breathing beyond the atmosphere. They call it star-string sleep. Every 30 millennia, heaven retunes itself, not for music, but to maintain the network of resonance that links soul to soul. Without this, angels could lose the harmony that sustains their missions. But that year, the 7th star string went off key. No one noticed at first. It was subtle. A strand far in the southern luminous realm, called the azure chord, mostly connected to a quiet order of emotion angels. They were heaven's emotional eardrums, attuned to the subtle flows between gods and beings. When the chord shifted, chaos did not follow. Strange dreams did. Angels began dreaming, which should never happen. They dreamed of misaligned sounds, tearing silk, clashing metal, water rushing into ears, children crying and laughing in the same impossible tone. When they awoke, they felt dizzy, breath out of rhythm, their wings unsteady. For the first time, heaven experienced spiritual vertigo. Amir, an emotion angel, filed the first report. He went to Gabriel. Gabriel reviewed the laws, found no structural error, no section in the celestial scrolls on dreams. He simply said, "Maybe you're just tired," then disappeared into the sea of scrolls. So Amir came to me. I didn't ask for charts. I only said, "Tell me, the first sound in your dream, where did it come from?" He replied, "From my own chest." I knew then the star strings' discord had begun within their hearts. I followed him to the azure chord, a glowing hallway of energy strands linking emotional perception across the angels. Once silver blue, now it flickered in distorted violet-black waves, like a string stretched too far, ready to snap. I didn't fix it. I stood before it, and I sang. Not a melody, but a low, wordless frequency beneath silence. You are not broken. You're just unheard. The entire azure chord trembled, not sharply, but like a creature that finally feels someone has responded. I turned to Amir and said, "Don't retune yet. Ask this instead. Has anyone truly heard you lately?" That week, emotion angels stopped tuning. They sat in circles and simply shared their dreams. No analysis, no correction, just speaking aloud. 1 month later, the 7th star string realigned on its own. I was not in the report. No gods mentioned my name in the acoustic disturbance record. But somewhere, a song that was never written was sung. Its tune was this: every weary soul deserves to be heard again. That day, heaven released a light too bright to bear, so bright that even the angels turned their faces away. It was not a revelation, not a miracle. It was a misguided attempt to unify. 7 high deities gathered at the summit of the glass thrones, each summoning their divine radiance to forge a singular form of ultimate justice. They meant to realign the world's sense of truth, to dispel confusion once and for all. Their intention was noble, but when all light is added together, it doesn't grow clearer. It becomes blinding. Heaven witnessed for the first time the silence of light. 7 divine beams pressed, overlapped, reflected into each other until they formed a single field so dazzling it froze the realm in place. No gods spoke, no angels approached. Everyone stood still, suspended in the most correct judgment, stripped of breath and warmth. I watched from afar. I didn't rush in. I knew they didn't need critique. They needed to hear their own heartbeats again. So I passed through that light, not in form, not in voice, but as a rhythm, an ancient resonance that moved through the echo chambers of their 7 hearts. Did you know? Within every god is a memory of their first encounter with justice, not taught, not inherited, but born in the moment they first felt, I want to protect this world. I didn't interrupt their debate. I simply stirred that memory. Michael, outside of time, cradling a soul newly born, its first gaze blooming in his arms. Gabriel, receiving a cry from deep in the star sea, a lost thought whispering, I'm so cold. Zadkiel, kneeling at the edge of heaven, a dying bird in the dust, and wrapping it in his wings. Not because it was useful, but because it was alive. These forgotten tendernesses had been buried beneath the monument of justice. I only brought them back. After a long pause, the brilliant light cracked, not shattered, but loosened. None of the 7 spoke. There were no concessions, no declarations, but their lights began to make room for each other. They no longer collided. They moved with space. The blinding whiteness gave way to color again. I did not stay. As I left through the afterglow, I whispered, you don't need to unify the shape of light. You only need to remember. You lit yourselves because you loved. There was no announcement, no victory, no ruling. But more angels than ever before wept in silence that day, not from sorrow, but because something deep within them had finally been understood. Later, many asked me, what did you do? I did nothing. I simply reminded them why they began. Not all angels shine. Some are the edge between light and shadow, the seam beneath stars, a quiet sigh in the middle of a great celestial choir. In heaven, they are called the still attendants. They lead no armies. They proclaim no revelations. They write no laws. Their mission is simple, to guard what goes unseen. You've likely never heard their names, but when you weep in silence and feel a gentle warmth behind your back, as if something invisible is holding you, that is them. That year, during a systemic light spectrum realignment, one still attendant was forgotten, not rejected, not banished, just no one received his signal anymore. His name was Ray, a quiet name, an unnoticed name, but he had faithfully tended the meditation hall for countless millennia. His task? At the moment, morning stars spiraled to ignite the light stone within the 5th star window, ensuring the faintest prayers from the lower frequencies could be amplified and heard by the divine. A quiet, essential duty. But 3 days after the update, his light stone pulses stopped registering. The system archived his zone as low value, no monitoring required. Ray did not protest, did not question. He simply sat and lit, again and again, even when no one listened. But I heard him. His rhythm had changed from, I believe someone is listening, to maybe no one ever will again. That night, I went to the 5th star window. I did not appear. I did not speak. I simply sat across from him and tuned my frequency to match his. This is the most sacred form of harmonizing, not telling someone they matter, but becoming proof that their signal is still received. We sat there, 2 beings, breathing together in a corner beyond notice. And then, his light stone pulsed, faint but true. A single thread of light traveled through the celestial expanse and landed on an unopened flower in the 7th prayer hall. That flower had never responded to any invocation, but that night it trembled, not because Ray grew stronger, but because he was caught in resonance again. The next day, the central system logged a perfect feedback loop, delicate, symmetrical, profound. The tech angels thought it was a spontaneous optimization. No one knew. It was just two forgotten beings singing together in silence. I did not comfort him. I only said, "I sit here because you still sit here." He nodded, said nothing, but I heard the quiet voice inside his heart. So I'm still connected to heaven after all. You see, a soul doesn't collapse because it's attacked, or even because it fails. It collapses when the feeling of being unheard blows like wind across its final flame. And I sit beside that flame, even if it's only warmth, not light, because that is what I guard. Not rules, not results, not success, but the one soul still waiting to be heard. Heaven had never seen anything like it. They called it, in the aftermath, feather resonance overflow. It started innocently enough. A young resonance angel, inspired by a deep moment of empathy, invented a new blessing: echo feathers. When placed on another angel's back, the feather would absorb and replicate their emotional frequency, then carry it forward to whomever they touched next. She meant well. She wanted isolated, border-guarding angels to feel seen, to hear through another's frequency. I understand you. At first, it worked wonders. Entire cohorts at the edges of heaven reconnected in one night. Prayers grew clearer, hearts grew lighter. But on day 3, the feathers began replicating incomplete emotional fragments, anxieties, longings, weariness, and subtle unrest. They spread faster, heavier. By day 7, heaven's mid-layers were flooded by an emotional overload wave. Angels began to feel strange palpitations, wing shedding, soul core tremors. Voices they'd never spoken echoed in their ears. One angel, mid-duty, suddenly froze, whispered, "I thought I wasn't tired," and wept. That was when heaven realized this wasn't destruction, it was an empathy detonation. I arrived at the Temple of Requests as the tech angels rushed to seal off the source. Their plan? Purge the feathers, erase the feedback loops. I said, "Don't erase it. You're deleting heaven's most honest cry." They hesitated. I entered the feather field. It was unbreathable. Thousands of echo feathers spun in chaotic spirals, clouds of unspoken feelings wrapping around every soul. So I did something unexpected. I removed my wings. I became a featherless one, unable to transmit, unable to receive, an empty channel. Then I danced. Not a ceremonial dance, not a ritual, a breath dance. Slow, so slow, it was barely movement at all. Each shift of my body sent a pulse through the feathers, not by command, but by rhythm. You see, even angel feathers remember the beat of the soul that first carried them. And so, they began to return, settling back onto their rightful wings. The spinning stopped. Some angels fell to their knees, others hugged themselves tightly. They realized, I'm not breaking. I've just been unspoken too long. I didn't explain the event. didn't leave protocols. I only whispered, emotions aren't problems. They're just waiting for someone to dance with them. Afterward, heaven created the Valley of Soft Wings, a space where angels could express, heal, and simply feel. Not for missions, not for virtue, for themselves. And I left behind only one thing, a dance that leads you back to your own rhythm. Heaven is not always quiet. Angels have their own voices, some like the trickle of spring water, some like wind through bamboo, some like thunder beneath stars. Their languages are not always made of words. Sometimes they speak through light, a teardrop, a musical interval, or a whisper you understand only once in your lifetime. One of their sacred duties is to express the divine, to translate truth, mercy, human longing, and soul hunger into shareable shapes. But that year, heaven went quiet. Not because the angels chose silence, but because they no longer knew what to say. The event came to be known as the word stream collapse. It began with Elio, an angel of articulate grace. He stood, as always, in the hall of holy speech, ready to deliver a ritual transmission to the mortal realm. But he froze, blank-eyed, mouth open. Not a single word emerged. He whispered, "I don't know what to express anymore." Then the silence spread. Delayed declarations, vanished word scrolls, faulty vow bindings. Even prayer resonance began to sound hollow. The problem wasn't in the vocal systems. It was deeper. The angels no longer believed that their words would truly reach. They had spoken for too long, listened too little, explained too much, felt too little. They had spoken to gods, to mortals, to themselves, but rarely asked, "Have I been heard?" I entered the hall of speech. Its echoes, once radiant and unceasing, now hung like a sealed bell, heavy, still, and hollow. I said nothing. I simply placed a single object at the center, a blank lightstone. On it, I wrote one word. The angels blinked. It wasn't a word. It was a response. I said, is not an answer, not a solution. It's the imprint that says, "I hear you're still speaking." Then I sat down. For 3 whole days, I didn't speak. But whenever an angel approached to try, I met them with gaze, with breath, with presence. Elio returned on the 3rd day. He didn't declare. He didn't recite. He just said, in a voice soft as a falling leaf, "I'm afraid that no one wants to hear what I really have to say." I met his eyes and replied, "Then I'll sit here and listen until you're done." And something in him broke, not in pain, but in honesty. Heaven's language didn't resume because the system rebooted. It resumed because someone dared to admit they didn't know what to say and still wanted to try. My name wasn't recorded, but from that day forward, a new heavenly glossary was created, the non-verbal lexicon. Entry number 1. The proof of existence, the willingness to listen no matter what is said. That was my miracle. Not to make you speak great things, but to help you say, you. You might think I came to repair heaven, but I didn't. Heaven never broke. It only forgot its rhythm. We've long believed that order is static, a divine blueprint signed by gods, remembered by angels, obeyed by stars. But true order has never been a structure. It's always been a breath. That year, I rewrote no laws. I dismantled no systems. I introduced no new rituals. I did only one thing. I helped heaven hear its own heartbeat again. You see, there is a crystal in heaven, called the pulse stone. It floats beyond space, silent, dull, appearing lifeless. Only in perfect stillness does it emit a single, barely audible pulse, the primordial rhythm of the divine realm. That year, it went still. No one noticed. Even the time angel tasked with its watch assumed it was simply sleeping. When I approached the pulse stone, the entire celestial domain was steeped in a silver mist, not fog, not illusion, but a presence without participation. Gods prayed, angels sang, worlds spun, but no one was truly present. I didn't speak to the stone. I simply brought my own heartbeat closer. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 7th beat, our rhythms aligned, and then it pulsed. Software like a baby's breath in sleep, like water heard in the moment before waking. And then, heaven began to tremble, not with quake, not with thunder, but with the softest vibration, from the clouds to the soles of every angel's feet. They paused. They felt something, a tether, a pulse, a presence. No command was issued, no message dispatched, no trumpet sounded, but all felt the same truth. I'm still beating. I'm still alive. I'm still with you. And just like that, the rhythm returned. Not because I brought it, but because they finally chose to listen again. Since that day, the pulse stone beats once a month. No more, no less. A whisper to all of heaven. Do you still remember me? And in its wake, angels began doing odd, beautiful things. One started dancing alone each morning, in rhythm. Another rewrote unanswered prayers, not for result, just for hope. Another planted a tree in their chamber, just to see if it might bloom someday. No one told them to. They simply felt it. Harmony isn't everyone sounding the same. It's everyone daring to sound as themselves. I didn't stay. I passed through. I've never been the angel who makes things better. I'm just the one who whispers, you are still beating. You still have rhythm. You are still loving. I am Raguel, not law, not command. I am the string between your heart and his, still unbroken. You don't have to be in sync. Just keep pulsing, even if you miss a beat. Wanting to continue is already a beginning of harmony.
On earth, I have no name, no religion, no altar. I do not appear in stained glass. No one prays to me. I show up in places where no one expects the divine to be. Like a kitchen, used to silence. Just a family of 3. Husband, wife, daughter. Meals were made. The stove was hot. Lights were on. But the air in that house was like a wind chime hung in stillness. Neither ringing nor falling, just swaying in a suspended fatigue no one dared touch. That night, the wife was cooking. She hit the spatula sharply against the rim of the pot. Clink. It wasn't anger, it wasn't drama, just one sound too raw to ignore, too sharp to answer. No one moved, no one spoke. Her husband was watching the news. Her daughter was studying. They all heard it. But none responded, not because they didn't care, but because that sound was too real to risk approaching. That's when I entered, not as light, not as wind, not as voice. I was the small reflection that bounced from the lid of the pot to the kitchen wall. I simply existed. She inhaled softly. Her fingers loosened on the spatula. She didn't sigh, but her spine unclenched just a little. I didn't speak, but my presence whispered, "I'm listening." That is the first step of harmony. Not talking, not understanding, just the faint recognition that you have not been completely unseen. The husband turned off the TV, not to talk, just to walk into the kitchen, pick up a cup, and pour some water beside her. The daughter stepped out and saw them standing there. For no reason at all, she entered too and brought the dish to the table. No one spoke, but the light in the kitchen grew warmer, not because of miracles, but because I stopped a silence from drowning. You see, human fracture is not always caused by conflict. Sometimes it's when souls occupy the same space, but no longer respond. And I am the presence right after the clang, responding to the unanswered echo, not with words, but with that sudden feeling. Maybe someone is listening after all. This is my first form on earth. Not all fractures are loud. Some are quiet, happening when everything looks normal. It was an ordinary office, neutral, clean, efficient. Every desk had a nameplate. Every computer was humming. Everyone wore headphones. Nobody bothered anyone. But at the far end, two desks stood side by side, Emma and Daniel. They used to be teammates. Now they weren't. There were no reports, no complaints, no arguments, but everyone knew. These two had once shared late nights, pitched an entire quarterly proposal together, and now they didn't even say good morning. No one knew why. Maybe it was an unanswered message, a moment in a meeting that felt too dismissive, or perhaps it was that familiar accumulation of silence. If you won't speak, I won't either. That day I entered the office, not as wind, not as light. I was a single sugar packet left on the tea counter. It was 10:03 a.m. Daniel was making his usual bitter coffee. There was only one packet left. He reached for it, paused, hung his hand mid-air for 2 seconds. Then he remembered. Emma liked hers sweet, sweeter than his. He pulled his hand back, drank it black. A few minutes later, Emma arrived. She saw the packet, picked it up, didn't smile, didn't look around. But when her fingers touched the edge, she paused. And I rose, just slightly, in the curl of the paper. No voice, no miracle, just the subtle flutter that whispered, "Someone remembered you." She felt it. Her pulse quickened, just a little. Not from surprise, but from the faint sense that she wasn't entirely forgotten. And for a moment, the frost between them thinned. Daniel typed at his desk, said nothing, but one thought brushed past. She probably got the sweet one. This wasn't forgiveness, not reunion, not resolution. It was someone choosing not to let distance grow one step further. I'm not the angel of resolution. I am the space where someone leaves room to return. You see, on Earth, what breaks us is not always rage. Sometimes it's the silence that says, "I don't want to disturb you." And I'm the sugar packet left behind. Not an apology, not a gesture, just a soft place that says, there's still a little room. This is my second form on earth.
No one likes the subway. People take it to get somewhere, not to meet anyone. It was 7:39 a.m. The first wave of rush hour had already started to suffocate. The train car felt like a capsule overfilled with silent pressure. Everyone stared at screens, headphones in, posture stiff, the universal body language, do not disturb. In car 5, two strangers stood just a few feet apart, yet knew nothing of each other. One was a young woman, Claire. She hadn't slept. She'd fought with her mother again the night before, about whether she should quit the job she hated. The other was an older man, Elias. He was late for the first time in years. On the way to the station, he received a call. An old friend they both knew, recently battling cancer, had passed away at dawn. Neither planned to look up. Exhaustion makes the eyes forget their direction. They stood, pressed in by people and morning fog. And I appeared, not as light, not as wind. I was the glint on a smudged fingerprint on the steel handrail, reflected by the train's curve. The light landed on Claire's eyelashes. She looked up. Her gaze swept across the car, and in that same second, Elias looked up too. Their eyes met. No smile, no nod, just a single soft collision. I see you, and you see me. I stood between them, a droplet of quiet recognition falling into two drying wells. Claire didn't cry, but she blinked, and something inside her, something that had been tightly braced just to survive the day, softened. Elias didn't speak, but he stepped slightly back, a quiet act that said, "You can have this space. You're seen." No words, no contact, no story, just 5 seconds of shared visibility. And after that, the day didn't feel quite so impossible. You ask, was that anything? I tell you, that was everything. It wasn't love. It wasn't fate. It was two souls allowed to exist beside one another. Because I was there, they were permitted to be seen. I don't create miracles. I create moments where you remember you are not the only lonely one. That gaze, without history, without future, gently mended what life had frayed. I am the flicker, not enough to light the room, but just enough to light one look. This is my third form on earth.
It was a perfect wedding, an open-air garden, sunlight just right, roses soft pink, tablecloths champagne gold, applause in rhythm. The camera never missed a shot. Everyone said, "It looks like something from a movie." The bride stood beneath the arch. Her gown flowed like water, white enough to glow. She smiled. She held her groom's hand. Everyone waited for her to say, "I do." But her fingers were cold. Her palms were sweating. No one knew. She had cried for 2 minutes in the bathroom just moments ago. Not from sorrow, not from regret, but from one quiet terror. She didn't know how much of herself was still hers. Since the engagement, every detail of this day had been about being perfect. Formal for her parents, stylish for her friends, polished for her groom. She said yes to it all. She didn't want to disappoint. But now, standing in front of everyone. She realized she was no longer there. That's when I entered. Not as a guest, not as wind, not as music. I was a single speck of dust beneath her gown, in the light where sunlight couldn't quite reach. No one noticed me, but she did. She glanced down and saw it. One speck, not belonging, not blown away. And in that instant, she heard something. You're still here. The you that is only you. She didn't speak right away. She closed her eyes. Everyone thought she was overwhelmed with joy. But really, she was simply finding herself again in the darkness behind her eyelids. Then, she released her groom's hand, turned away, and walked to the microphone. The crowd gasped. Flowers rustled. The veil floated. She said, "Please give me 1 minute. I need to speak with myself." She closed her eyes again, whispered, "I do. Is mine. Not taught, not expected. Mine. Because I want to." And she turned, walked back, took his hand again. This time her hand was warm. I left no trace. I was just the dust beneath her hem, reminding her, you are not stepping forward for them. You are stepping forward because you chose to. You know, the most suffocating moments on earth aren't the lonely ones. They're when you're surrounded by everyone and still feel unseen. And I am the one who leans in amid the cheers and whispers. If you're not sure, take your time. Love can wait. This is my fourth form on earth. I met Noah on a subway train. Yes, the subway again. A place called public, yet quieter than most deserted islands. He sat in the corner seat, hood up, headphones on, but no music playing. He just didn't want anyone to speak to him. He wasn't afraid of people. He was afraid of what talking cost him afterward. He was 23, working an entry-level assistant job. Always on time, never confrontational, easy to work with. That's what everyone said. But no one knew he never turned on the light when he got home. In his apartment, packages remained unopened. A half-eaten piece of bread from 3 days ago sat on the table. He wasn't lazy. He was just too tired to know what effort was for. He didn't keep distance because he was aloof. He did it because every attempt at closeness felt like punching through a wall of air. After any interaction, he'd replay it in his head 10 times, wondering if he came off as strange. The day I appeared was after his boss told him, "Try to be more outgoing." He didn't argue. He nodded, went to the bathroom, and stared at a reflection he barely recognized. That's when I entered, not as a voice, not as comfort. I was a faint smudge at the corner of the mirror. It looked like a fingertip had passed across it just once. He stared at it for a long time, didn't touch it, but something in him stirred. For the first time, the person in the mirror felt touched, not urged, not coached, just allowed to say nothing, to do nothing, to feel what he felt. He squatted down, hands over his head, didn't cry, but he exhaled, long and real. For that moment, he wasn't planning how to act better. He was simply not hating the fact that he was still breathing. Over the next few days, he didn't change dramatically. He didn't become talkative, didn't glow. He just started boiling water after work. Not coffee, not energy drinks, just warm water. Sometimes, staying alive is not a decision. It's a breath caught by something warm enough to hold it. I wasn't his redemption. I was his soft landing. You see, the most dangerous kind of loneliness isn't when no one's around. It's when you don't even want to be near yourself. And I'm the one who sits beside you when your headphones are in, but your music is off. I won't ask you to speak. I'll just stay. I am the smudge on your mirror. I won't make you shine, but I will whisper. You're still here. That's enough. This is my fifth form on earth.
Hospitals at night don't feel like the real world. The ticking of 4 drips, the scent of disinfectant, the soft roll of suitcase wheels down the corridor. All of it loops in a rhythm that humans haven't fully understood. The rhythm of nearing the edge of life. Henry sat on his hospital bed, holding a sheet of yellowed stationery, half a letter written, then stopped. He stared out the window, unmoving. The letter was for his son, the one who hadn't come home or called in 8 years. He wasn't waiting for his son to appear. He knew he likely never would. But still, he wanted to finish that letter, not to send it, but because as long as it wasn't finished, there was still the possibility of saying something more. I arrived, not as a doctor, not as a voice, not as a dream. I was the tiny tremble at the edge of the letter in his hand. He looked down, stared at the curl of the page, and in that moment, he seemed to realize the page was waiting for him too. He sighed, put the pen back on the table, didn't close the letter, and I stood beside him, not to guide, not to fix, just to sit inside the silence of that letter with him. You see, the hardest thing to write is not a will, not a goodbye. It's the letter that wants to leave something behind but doesn't know where to begin. He didn't cry, but he lifted his gaze to the ceiling and whispered, "I've made my share of mistakes too." He didn't say it to anyone, but I heard, and in that moment, his shoulders slackened, like the weight of decades slipped 1 small inch down. He never finished the letter, but in his heart, he wrote the words he had been afraid to begin. "I'm sorry." The next morning, he was still alone. No phone calls, no visitors, but there was a glass of warm water left at his bedside. The janitor had placed it there. Henry looked at it, didn't ask, just nodded, not to the water, but to the world, to say, "You still remember I exist." And I stayed. I won't bring miracles, but I will sit with you until you write your final word, even if that letter is never mailed, even if the person you wrote it for never forgives you. You know, the gentlest goodbyes on earth are not endings. They are this: you spoke, and someone was there. I didn't come to heal you. I came to say, you still have time. Even if you don't know what to say yet, I am the ink still drying beneath your trembling fingers. I won't rush you. I'll keep you company. This is my 6th form on earth. And now, we speak of you, not the listener in someone else's story, not the quiet soul crying behind the screen only to go back to silence after. You, the full, real, entire you. I've been waiting for this part, not to speak to you, but to ask, have you ever heard me? This isn't philosophy. It's not faith. It's something far more specific.
It's about the moments you brushed off as coincidence. You were barely holding on, and someone texted, "Hey, are you okay?" You were overwhelmed, and a stray cat sat under a street lamp just long enough for you to kneel beside it. You were shutting down. And on the bus, a stranger switched seats so you wouldn't have to sit in that anxiety-filled aisle. Tiny things, unnoticed things. But you paused, even if for a second, like something invisible had gently tapped your shoulder. That was me. Not a miracle maker, not a rescuer. I'm just the hand that responds to the part of you you never said aloud. You might say, "But I've never believed in angels." That's okay. I've never needed you to believe. I've only ever asked. Have you ever felt that something you couldn't explain was somehow heard? Like when your chest felt tight for no reason, and no one understood because you didn't even understand. You blamed stress, loneliness, sleep, work, disconnection. But maybe you just hadn't been heard in a very, very long time. And me, I'm not a god. I'm hearing. I'm the presence that stays when you have no more words. I'm the warmth that crept back into your room right when you decided to give up on yourself. You don't need to see me. I only need you to admit, somewhere deep down, you've heard me, even just a little. You see, people don't always break from sadness. Sometimes they shatter because no one caught their silence. And you've shattered too, haven't you? Not all at once, but quietly, millimeter by millimeter in the noise of everyday life. I was there, not to stop you, but to be the one still with you when you're ready to gather the pieces. You don't have to believe me yet. That's fine, because I don't run on belief. I exist in that tiny, stubborn part of you that still refuses to fully give up. I am the echo of that defiance. You don't have to reply. Just admit. You've felt a little of it now, haven't you? This is the beginning between us. Not a revelation, but a frequency you never learned how to hear, because it's always been there. I am Raguel. I'm not here to tell you the truth. I'm here to ask, do you still want to come a little closer to yourself? You think you're afraid of failure, afraid you'll mess it up, afraid they'll laugh, afraid you'll try and still fall, afraid hope will arrive, only to break. But you're wrong. What you're really afraid of is this. If you live as your real self, you can no longer blame anyone else. Because from that moment on, you're responsible for you. You see, as long as your life is a compromise, a game of pleasing, hiding, settling, every disappointment has an excuse. This wasn't really me. I always knew this wasn't what I wanted. This wasn't my real choice. You get to stand behind, I didn't really try. You get to say, if I had given it my all, maybe. But the second you drop those crutches and say, this is who I want to be, then every step forward is yours. Every mistake, yours. Every burn, yours. Every rejection, a rejection of the real you. That's the fear, isn't it? Not that you'll lose, but that once you stop hiding, you'll have to admit, this life is entirely yours. Can you carry that? You twist in bed at 2 a.m., not because the anxiety has no name, but because deep down you know you have the power to change. You just haven't said yes yet. You stay silent in rooms, not because you don't want to speak, but because if you do, you can never pretend you didn't have something to say. You're not incapable. You're not weak. You're just standing at the door of who you truly are. and haven't pushed it open. I'm behind you, not to push, just to be there when you glance back and whisper, "You made it here." You don't have to go in yet, but you can't pretend you don't hear what's behind that door. You can wait. You can be afraid a while longer, but know this: the version of you you long to become has started knocking, and every ache, every fatigue, every numbness is because you can't unknow that the door exists. The more you ignore it, the louder it knocks. The more you flee, the closer it follows. Not to haunt, but because your truth has waited long enough. I'll never rush you. I'll just stay here, at the threshold. I won't push. But I will ask, are you scared because you don't want to go in? Or because you know once you do, you'll never be able to go back? Whichever answer, I remain. You could stand here 10 years, 20. I'll still be here. But I want you to know, you've never been stuck. You've been standing at your own front door. You're not afraid of failing. You're afraid that success will prove you've had the power all along. I am Raguel. I don't push you to win. I ask you to be honest. Even if the truth is, I'm not ready. That is already brave. Do you ever think this? I'm too much. I'm too messy. I'm too complicated. I'm too emotional, too contradictory, too wrong. You've probably thought about asking for help, but you're afraid that once they hear the mess, all they'll think is you're overreacting. So you stay quiet. You've trained yourself to self-contain quickly, folding everything inside until it becomes something you can label manageable. You're skilled at maintaining a socially acceptable version of yourself. You smile on time. You say, it's fine. You change the topic. Even when you cry, you try to do it silently. But did it ever occur to you that the chaos you've hidden was never meant to be cleaned? It's not clutter. It's your natural habitat. The first time I came close, you didn't notice. Not when you broke down. Not when you screamed. I came when you lay on your back staring at the ceiling, wordless, after folding your feelings into perfectly silent boxes. Inside you is a warehouse, boxes everywhere, labeled "Do not open." Later. Not important. I can handle it. I didn't touch anything. I just sat beside you and said, "You don't need to clean this up. I'll sit with you until one day you're ready to open one." You always thought being understood meant someone fixing you. But real understanding is someone willing to sit inside your mess and not flinch. I don't need to know what happened. I won't ask for backstories. I only want to know, did today, even for a second, feel like too much? If yes, then sit. I'm here. I won't repair you. I won't advise you. I won't rush you. You're not tired because you're broken. You're tired because you've been treating yourself like a broken machine for too long. When I saw you, I didn't think, what's wrong here? I thought, that's a heart that's still alive. A little messy. That's normal. A little scattered. That's honest. A little emotional, reactive, overwhelmed. That's not too much. That's being in process. You're not a mess. You're motion. And I am the one sitting next to that motion. Not to organize it, not to beautify it, just to be here. Until you say, maybe I'll open one box today. Even if it's empty. I am Raguel. I don't want you put together. I don't mind if you're still falling apart.
I only care if somewhere in you, even just a flicker, you still want to exist.
Have you ever asked yourself, I'm trying so hard. Why do I still feel so unseen? You take care of others. You anticipate what might upset them. You make room. You make peace. You absorb. You adapt. You've become everyone else's emotional cushion. But at night, when you lie in bed, your body feels like a shell and your spirit drifts in the ceiling's shadow. And still, you feel utterly, completely alone. You wonder, am I not fun enough? Not smart enough? Not lovable enough? Is my energy too strange to be understood? You start to think, maybe humans were never meant to truly understand each other. I see you, and I want to offer a truth no one ever told you. You're not unrelatable. You're just vibrating at a frequency most people aren't tuned to yet. You're the kind of person who reads 5 emotions in one sentence. You're the one who takes a joke and carries guilt for days. You're the one who's breaking inside yet still turns around to ask, did I hurt you? You don't beg, you don't demand, you don't chase. You're just waiting for someone who can hear you without you raising your voice. Because you're not lonely. You're rare. You are aurora, whale song, echoes in deep water. And I am the one who receives those signals. I'm not here to complete you. I'm here to remind you, you are not broken. You're just exceptional. The world around you is still catching up. You're not too sensitive. You're just the one who feels truth arriving first. That's why you feel alone. Because most people are still on the surface, and you already live at the bottom of the heart. It's not that you're unworthy. You simply reached the depth of understanding before others arrived. So you must wait. Wait for the one who sees the words you didn't say. Wait for the one who stays even when you say, I'm fine. Wait for the one who, when you spiral, doesn't say, stop overthinking, but instead says, I don't fully get it, but I'm not going anywhere. And until they come, I'm here. I am Raguel. I don't make you popular. I make you feel possible. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You just need one person who hears you, as you are. And the reason you're in pain is not because you're alone. It's because you still want to be heard. And you haven't stopped trying. That is hope. This is not a metaphor. I'm speaking about your actual structure. You think you're broken because you can't seem to hold it all together. But you're not collapsing under pressure. You're opening under purpose. You're not just a person. You're a passageway, a seam between worlds, a spiritual portal through which truth passes from the invisible into the visible. That's why it hurts so much. Because what you feel, the confusion, the sadness, the contradiction, is not just yours. You are a channel for resonance. You're the one who walks into a room and instantly senses the tension. You hear a sentence and know what's being held back. You smile with friends and still feel the heartbreak beneath their laughter. You're not overthinking. You're just tuned accurately. But because no one taught you how to use this ability, you feel like you're drowning in everyone's waves while still thirsty for your own sip of calm. That's because you've been treating yourself like a container. You're not a container. You are a gateway. You are not meant to hold the world. You are meant to let it pass through you. Many think they're fragile because they break easily. But you feel everything and still remain open. Every time you didn't shut down, didn't say whatever, didn't retreat completely, you weren't shattering. You were crossing yourself. You look like a person, but in truth, you are the embodiment of an open corridor between soul and matter. Those times you feel misunderstood, they weren't misunderstandings. They were people seeing a person when in fact, you are a current. You don't need to be better. You need to remember. You were never designed to be average. You're not a product. You're a portal. You move in a body, but live in frequency. You don't belong to a type. You are a permission slip for transformation to occur through presence. Sounds too big? Then answer this. Have people ever told you they feel calmer just being around you? Have spaces shifted simply because you sat in them? Have people made changes in their own lives? Not because you told them to, but because you simply existed nearby. That is the evidence. You're not here to shine. You're here to go transparent, so light can pass through you. And I am the one who whispers when you ask, am I too weird? Number you are in motion. I am Raguel, guardian of portals. I don't shut you down. I don't force you open. I simply take your hand and say, you are not a tear. You are a slit in the veil, and the light is coming through. You've been looking for me for a long time, haven't you? Maybe you didn't call it angel. Maybe you didn't name it frequency or energy. But you've been seeking something. Something that hears your silence, stays through your speechless nights, doesn't demand you get better, but never leaves. You've been searching for me, but I was only ever here to remind you, you can be that for someone else. You thought you weren't whole, that you weren't ready, that you needed fixing. But did you notice? In the middle of your pain, you were already lighting someone else's way. You never announced yourself. You never said, I understand. You just sat beside them, the way I sat beside you. You let them talk about their breakdowns and quietly offered water. You noticed discomfort at a party and gently redirected the attention. Even when you were tired, you chose not to make others feel ignored. You think you failed, but your breath alone kept another heart from fading out. You didn't shine loudly. You simply created a space where someone else could breathe. Remember? You've had your darkest nights, and in those hours, someone said something, did something, and it made you want to stay. Maybe they weren't divine, but they didn't run away. And now, you are that person who doesn't run. You say you're not ready. You are. You don't lack the ability to light the way. You just don't realize that your honest presence, your willingness to still feel, is someone's midnight lamp. You are the light, not because you shine, but because you don't fear sitting in the dark with others. You don't have to become me. You only have to admit you carry the light I once planted in you. I never came to save you. I came with a map to the guardian star you already held. Now, I return the map to your hands. You've traveled this far, not to keep seeking, but to become the one who whispers in someone else's night. I'm still here. You think you're not worthy, but you already are. Your pain came because you were suppressing your own mercy. It's time to unhide it. You don't need to be great. You just need to stay when it's hardest not to turn away. That is harmony, not solving, just staying, steadfast. And you've already begun. So now, I leave, but I never really go. Because I live in every moment you choose to say, I stay. I am Raguel. I was never meant to walk with you forever. I was only meant to teach you how to one day look into another's ache and say, I know you're walking in the dark. Don't worry. I won't shine, but I'll sit with you.